Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be showing you Mooncat's first official collection of 2026 called Deadly by Nature. This is a small mixed piece lineup of formulas which include a new finish to Mooncat, which are UV or solar reactive polishes, and they are all obviously inspired by the dangerous beauty found in nature's flora and fauna. As always, I will share more of my thoughts for the end after comparisons. For now, let me show you the swatches. The first polish we have is called Black Widow, which is inspired by the Black Widow spider, and this is described as a red magnetic lacquer that reveals a black base when magnetized. This had a phenomenal formula, super highly pigmented. As you can see on the first coat alone, it reaches almost near full opacity, which shouldn't be too surprising since it is a black base. And I think if your nails are shorter or just smaller than mine, you might be able to get away with this in one coat, but I did two just to make sure it's fully opaque and doesn't have any light spots. It was super smooth and easy to apply and magnetized super easily, and I wanted to show some examples of how to do the glass bead effect using either the magnetic wand or a horseshoe magnet. So for the first one, we're doing the wand, and after applying the coat of the polish, you immediately hover the wand over the nail as seen here and just kind of rotate it clockwise and counterclockwise. It honestly doesn't matter that you're going back and forth and not in the same direction the whole time. Also, apparently the speed doesn't matter, but I am just speeding up the clip so you're not sitting here watching. And unfortunately, this ended up being a little bit weaker than I was expecting it to be, but you still can see a little bead in the center of my nail. And then doing the glass bead with the horseshoe magnet, you can actually use a Mooncat box and then just cut off the bottom flaps so that way you can fit your nail into the box and see your nail through that little window in the front. So again, you're going to paint your coat, make sure it's a little bit thick because it makes it easier to magnetize. Slip the box over your nail and then take your horseshoe magnet and put it above the little circle cutout and then start rotating it. For either technique, you want to rotate for at least a minute. I admittedly only did maybe 30 seconds just to make it a little bit easier, and this technique did work out a lot better, but it was harder to hold since I'm doing my thumb and it's kind of hovering for my recording. It's much easier keeping your hand flat on the table. And here is Black Widow unmagnetized on the left, and then with the velvet effect on the right, which you can again achieve with the horseshoe magnet or with a wand too. Lastly, for my full hand swatch in direct sunlight, I'm showing Black Widow in 2 coats each with the glass bead on my pointer, velvet on my middle, cat eye on my ring, and unmagnetized on my pinky. I noticed that even though this does have a true black base, I feel like it's barely noticeable underneath all of the red magnetic shimmer. So if you really want the black to stand out, the cat eye effect is going to be the best for that, providing the most contrast, but honestly, I love how it looks no matter how you magnetize it. The second magnetic in the collection is called Taipan Venom, which is inspired by the inland taipan snake, and this one is described as a gold magnetic lacquer filled with a light green shimmer and bronze flakes that reveal a brown base when magnetized. The formula on this was so lovely, super easy to apply, just buttery smooth and very decently pigmented on the first coat. It's ever so slightly sheer, but it covers up right away on the second coat where it's basically fully opaque. At least I had a hard time seeing any visible nail line, likely due to all of the shimmer and flakies packed in here. But if your nails are much longer or you prefer doing thinner coats, you might need a third for this one. Usually I prefer my magnetics in the velvet effect, but this is one that I totally prefer in the cat eye style just because you get more of that contrast between that golden magnetic pigment and then those bronze flakes in the background and the brown base. Honestly, my only gripe is the base isn't as brown as I would want it to be, or how I thought it would look based off of the initial swatch photo that I saw. On me, it definitely picks up very, very gold leaning, and I just personally don't love the shade of brassy gold, but I do love it for the inspiration. Next we have Deadly Nightshade, which is inspired by Belladonna, and this is described as an ultra shifty shimmer that color shifts between shades of purple, teal, green, gold, and blue as it's viewed from different angles. It's basically a multi-chrome shimmer. I'm just kind of reading their direct descriptions, but yeah, this had another fantastic formula, super full coverage and very even on the first coat. It is just a touch sheer, but honestly, it's so hard to see the visible nail line because the shimmer is so incredibly strong and glowy, but the base is on the darker side, so I imagine most people wouldn't need more than 2 coats. You can see the 2 coats on me looks basically fully opaque, and yeah, as expected for a multi-chrome, the color shifts are so shifty. It again has this more goldish color head on, but then transitions to green and teal and to purple in very extreme lighting. I was able to get the shades of teal showing up in direct sunlight, and then in lower lighting, the colors are just more diffused and blended together in a way where it almost looks like a chrome oil spill. The next shade we have is called Werewolf Bane, and this one is inspired by Wolfsbane, and it's described as a deep purple holographic shimmer filled with a blue shimmer. I'm pretty sure we've seen this finish a couple of times before from Mooncat, and it is just so stunning. I love how glowy the shimmer is. I feel like that's definitely the star of the show, where the holo is there and you can see that sort of rainbow twinkle, or at least I was able to see it, especially in direct sunlight, but the shimmer is what stands out the most no matter what lighting you're in. It's just such a glowy shade. And I would say that's also kind of a duochrome effect, going from a blue to this indigo purple in more extreme lighting. There's honestly not much else to say about this polish. It is just so stunning, so I'll let you enjoy it. And now for the new solar polishes. The first one we have is Death's Trumpet, and this one is inspired by Foxglove. It's described as a pink solar lacquer filled with a blue shimmer that transitions to a bright shade of purple in its sun-activated state, which I'll attempt to show in the full hand swatch portion later. But for now, as you can see, this has a really nice smooth formula. It's a little bit on the crully side, where you can see it is a bit sheer. You can see through to my visible nail line, but it's not super glassy like a jelly. It kind of has this milky pink color, and I would say the pink is a little bit in that orchid color family. And while the blue shimmer might not look super glowy, it does provide this sort of internal glow. Now for my full hand swatch here, I'm wearing 2 coats of the polish, and you can see that it's slightly more purple than my first 2 fingers, which are gonna start to change now, but it just wasn't nearly as dark as I was expecting it to be. And rounding out the collection, we have Manchineel Tree, which is inspired by the Manchineel Tree. This is described as a neon green solar lacquer filled with an orange shimmer that transitions to a shade of burnt orange in its sun-activated state. Mooncat also has a note that this polish glows under black light, but they didn't mention that for the last shade, so I'm not sure how that works. I unfortunately don't have a black light to show you. But yeah, as far as the formula on this one, it has a somewhat similar crelly leaning base, but I didn't find it to be as self-leveling as Death's Trumpet, so it was a little bit patchy for me on the first coat, but doing a slightly thicker second coat pretty much evened it out. It is still just a little bit sheer where you can see some visible nail line, and depending on your application, the nail line will be a lot more apparent if you only do 2 coats, as you can probably see here on my full hand swatch, which, similar to Death's Trumpet, I feel like the transition wasn't as strong as I was expecting it to be. Again, it could be because I swatched them so early in the morning, but that's when I get the best direct sunlight at least. But even still, looking at their swatch photo, I feel like the activated state looks more chartreuse than a burnt orange. And here is my full hand swatch collage of the Deadly by Nature collection, worn in 2 coats each. The color palette is definitely very interesting between the darker shades on the top and the brighter ones on bottom, but it's not meant to be cohesive. Now, getting into comparisons, we're starting with Black Widow, and I first had to show this next to Dawn of the Empire, which is from the Star Wars collab, and I figured I could also show it next to Nocturne, which is another magnetic, although that one's technically a teal base with a more coppery shimmer and a gold metallic flake in the background. So between these, Dawn of the Empire is definitely the closest, being a black base with a red magnetic shimmer, but the shimmer in that looks a little bit more orangey. I also thought to show it next to Cyborg, which does have a red shimmer, but it's more of this denim blue base. So I think the closer shade was Bottled Rage, which is a red shimmer in a black base, but it's not magnetic. So showing Black Widow unmagnetized next to Bottled Rage, you can see that they are similar, but the shimmer just is so incredibly subtle in Bottled Rage. And for reference, here is Black Widow next to Gates of Hell, which sadly has been retired, and Bloodbender from the Avatar collection, which should still be around. I would say that Gates of Hell and Bloodbender have more of these berry, purpley kind of bases, so they're not really that similar. And lastly, here is Black Widow next to ILNP's Eclipse, which is a black to red multi-chrome, so you only really see the red at extreme angles. Next for Taipan Venom, I knew neither of these were going to be dupes at all, but they were kind of similar vibes at least. So I first pulled out Stumped, which is the brown jelly with gold and green iridescent flakies, as well as Holo Taco's Topaz Tears from their Birthstone collection, which is a deeper brown base with these tiny gold and green iridescent flakes. Between these two, Topaz Tears looks the closest, but it is a deeper base and missing that gold magnetic shimmer. I also wanted to show Taipan Venom next to Cracked Polish's Orchestra Pit, as well as Apocalypse's Glitter Never Changes, because even though they are different finishes, I just thought color-wise these were the closest, being those like brassy gold kind of colors, though I'm sure you can see that Cracked is much more yellow. I think the Apocalypse and Mooncat have a similar warmth, but Mooncat is a little bit more brown. And lastly, I have a comparison with Holo Taco's Bottle Service, which is a little bit more orangey in its base, or kind of like this marigold color, but it does have a very strong golden shimmer, so depending on the lighting, I could see how they're kind of similar, assuming, you wear the Mooncat unmagnetized. But yeah, they're not dupes. Then for Deadly Nightshade, I first pulled out Root of All Evil because I thought they had a similar multi-chrome shimmer. I know obviously head on they look incredibly different because Root of All Evil is green, but it does shift to teal and blue and purple in extreme lighting. So they are kind of similar in that way, but the other main difference is that Root of All Evil is a warmer purple base. For some other purple bases, I thought I could show it next to Mooncat's Take Me to Your Leader and Lavender Fields, but my bottle of Take Me to Your Leader has unfortunately faded. It also just has more of this orangey copper shimmer color, while Lavender Fields is a magnetic, but it's also a red shimmer, so overall very different. And lastly, Deadly Nightshade immediately reminded me of KBShimmer's Hidden Potential, which is a purple base filled with a multi-chrome shimmer that has all of the colors in the Mooncat, but I think it even has a coppery color. There's this sort of like warmer tone that you can see a little bit head on, while Mooncat is more of this stronger yellow color. And speaking of a warmer tone, I'm sure you can tell that the KBShimmer is this warmer undertone of purple, almost like this burgundy color, while Mooncat is a blue toned purple. But back to the shimmer, in extreme lighting you can see they have the same color shifts. I think it's just a little bit more densely packed in Mooncat. Next for Werewolf's Bane, the finish is probably the most similar to something like the Glory of Innocence, which has that linear hollow and glowy shimmer combination, but the Glory of Innocence looks to be a lighter lavender purple with a much lighter aqua colored shimmer. This actually reminded me of a couple of other Mooncat purples like Everybody Scream or Sealed with a Hiss, both of which are these mid-tone, blue-tone purple bases with a blue sort of shimmer or glitter. Everybody Scream is a much darker and more vibrant shade of purple though, and the blue is a little bit more subtle in comparison, so it's not as close as I thought, but Sealed with a Hiss is actually a bit closer than I was expecting, at least in terms of that same purple base color. Obviously the finishes are are very different, but they're kind of like cousin polishes. Since the blue shimmer in Werewolf's Bane is so glowy and strong, I wanted to show it next to a couple of other glowy Mooncat blues like Mercury's Tears or House of Hades, but again, this is just for reference because they are entirely different polishes. The other two are just very blue, and Werewolf's Bane looks much more purple. And for ILNP shades, this immediately reminded me of Flower Child or Glowstick, which is kind of like the magnetic version and slightly darker version of Flower Child, but they're much more pink. So I thought to layer them over Midnight Drive, which is a medium deep purple base color that I thought was kind of similar to Werewolf's Bane, but it ended up being a little too dark. So at least as far as the ILNP shades go, the intensity of the blue shimmer is most similar in Flower Child, but visually, for whatever reason, Glowstick just looks like a closer match. And since Midnight Drive was a little too dark, I decided to try this again, but using ILNP's high score, which is just a few shades lighter, and it is closer. Again, I feel like Flower Child is a little too glowy. It almost makes the base a little bit more blue toned. So Glowstick to me looks closer, but it just doesn't have as glowy of a shimmer. Then for Holo Taco shades, I at first pulled out Electric Sweetener since I thought the shimmer holo combo would be kind of close visually at least, but the shimmer is definitely not as glowy as in Mooncat, and it obviously has a much more red toned berry base color. So I thought Resting Witch Face would be a little bit closer in terms of the undertone, and I think it is, but it's obviously just more vibrant. And for Cirque shades, I pulled out Night Fever and Heart of Glass, which are glowy shimmers. Night Fever does have a purple base, but it's a bit more red tone, and Heart of Glass is more of a cobalt blue, and they both have a dainty holo, so very different overall. And lastly, here's a quick look at it next to Cracked Polish's No Reservations, which is a magnetic, but visually I thought it kind of had a similar look, especially in terms of the glowy blue shimmer, but Cracked is much more pink leaning. And speaking of pink, next up we have Death's Trumpet, and looking at it next to the Living Doll and Aphrodisiac, both of which I thought were cool toned pink bases, but they look so much lighter compared to Death's Trumpet. Here it is also next to A Midsummer's Dream, as well as Moonrise, which I think is a little bit closer in terms of the color being slightly orchidy. It also has a blue shimmer, but it's a much more sheer jelly base and with hollow flakes. And some other shades that I have are Euphoric and Poisonberry. Euphoric being an orchid pink cream, but it's a much more pastel shade, while Poisonberry is more of a true purple. Lastly, I actually decided to pull back out ILNP's Flower Child because the shade of pink looked really similar and it has a glowy blue shimmer as well. ILNP obviously does have this extra holographic sparkle and it's a bit more sheer, but color-wise, I would say that these were the closest, surprisingly. And lastly, for Manchineel Tree, I first wanted to show this next to Highway Glow, which is just a cream, but it's a lot more yellow leaning in color, so not as lime green. So I thought some closer greens would be Ribbit Ribbit or Apple of My Eye, which is a super old Mooncat shade. Ribbit Ribbit is much more blue toned in its base color, and it also has a blue shimmer as well, so it's definitely very different. Between these two, I would say Apple of My Eye is the closest, being this candy apple green. It's not as yellow as Manchineel Tree, and the shimmer in Apple of My Eye is more of a pink color and more subtle too. Some other shades I thought might be more similar included Crack's Experiment, which is this green base with a copper shimmer, and then I have Lurid's Cucumber Melon Mania, which also has a strong copper shimmer, but the base is more of that blue toned green. So between these, the Cracked is definitely the closest, but it is a little bit more pastel and the shimmer isn't as glowy. For some neon green comparisons, I pulled out Cracked Polish's Ooze, which is just a cream or a crully kind of finish, and then Prism's Mall Brat, which is a lime green crully with a golden shimmer. So I think that one is a bit closer because Ooze is just way more green overall. It's not as yellow leaning as Malbrat. So I thought to sort of soften Ooze, I could do one coat of Experiment on top of that, which kind of helped. I mean, it's like a cool combination, but still a little too dark to be an exact dupe. And lastly, I think the closest shade that I have is Cirque's High Society, which is a lime green sheer crully base with a golden copper shimmer. It does also technically have a dainty holo, but it's really subtle. So on the nail, I think formula-wise, these look the most similar, but High Society is a little bit more green. And that wraps up my swatches and comparisons of Mooncat's Deadly by Nature collection. As always, I cannot wait to hear what you think of this release because I thought it was so cool. It's just such a unique concept. It feels so Mooncat to me, which I love. So it's been really fun to just see their promotional marketing for this collection. I know some of it has been very triggering for some people who do have, you know, certain phobias, and I completely commiserate as somebody who does have a phobia. I understand how irrational the fear is, so I completely understand that, and I'm so sorry about it, but unfortunately, or I guess fortunately for me, I don't have any of the phobias associated with this collection, so I'm just really enjoying them. As usual, they had fantastic formulas as well, just super smooth and easy to apply, which is what I would expect for the price point of these. The only thing that sucked with my experience with these were with the new solar finishes, where as you saw in my full hand swatch portion, I did have direct sunlight, but I only got these in the mail on like Wednesday afternoon. So I really only had Thursday morning to film in direct sun. And it's just been kind of cloudy, like a little hazy. So I think maybe that's what made them less reactive compared to what I saw in like the creative brief for these and just, you know, their other swatches that they've shared on social media. So yeah, it kind of was a little bit of a letdown not seeing that stark contrast between the colors, but I feel like even the colors that they changed to aren't super different. Like they're still in the same family as these original shades, as opposed to going from like pink to blue, for example. So, you know, it's not a strong contrast to begin with, but yeah, I definitely am gonna try them again on another sunny day and see how they react, because hopefully they are a lot more reactive. In general, I am excited to see Mooncat venture into solar polishes because I just generally like them a little bit more than thermals because they do last longer. And as somebody with a massive collection who rarely goes through, let alone makes a dent in their polishes, it's just nice to have these in my collection without worrying that they're gonna die, at least anytime soon, because eventually they will stop transitioning, but that's not something that I really need to worry about. But I still did enjoy them because they are just the lighter, more springy kind of colors. But I still loved the other shades, of course, even though I'm not really gonna reach for them anytime soon. It's just because I'm a seasonal wearer, but they just were so refreshing to see for the spring, especially for anyone who hates pastels. I'm sure this collection is gonna be a winner. And I guess now that I look at it even more, Werewolf Bane, which is my favorite from the collection, is probably a good contender for like a spring summer shade because it's just so bright and glowy. But yeah, I would love to know what you think down below so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!